This is video cassette number 1, the velocity pressure-sensitive keyboard. The Synclavier digital music system is the most comprehensive musical system in the world today. It is a sophisticated keyboard instrument with pressure and velocity-sensitive keys, modulation and pitch-bending wheels, ribbon controller, breath controller, and pedals. It's a precise, drift-free digital sound synthesizer, which comes with over 200 preset sounds. More than that, it's a digital recording studio, which lets you record and play back any kind of real sound, not just synthesized sounds. The 32-track memory recorder turns the Synclavier into a complete multi-track music production system, and the music printing option provides you with a tireless music copyist, ready to transcribe anything you compose. These Synclavier instructional video cassettes provide an overview of the Synclavier system. On each cassette, Bill Keenan, our product specialist, demonstrates a different approach to the Synclavier. This first video cassette shows you how to recall and play Synclavier sounds, or timbres, on the keyboard, how to use the memory recorder, and how to start programming your own timbres. All these features are part of the Realtime or live Synclavier system. You can find complete details in the 3 instruction manuals. The manual that corresponds to this video cassette is Binder 1, the Real-Time Performance Options. The power of the Synclavier is based on its 16-bit mini-computer design. The speed of the processor allows the computer to carry out many functions simultaneously and instantly. The computer has up to 60,000 words of main memory and up to 8 million words of extended memory. This kind of capacity allows you to record, edit, and mix long sequences with up to 100,000 notes. Your unit can have up to 32 programmable synthesizer voices. This is enough voice power to create orchestral sequences with many different instruments playing at once. Or you can build up to a 32-voice single-instrument sound with tremendous richness and complexity. If you have the sample-to-disc option, the computer cabinet will contain the analog-to-digital and digital-to-analog converters that allow you to record and play real sounds. The disk drives provide a means of communicating the operating instructions, as well as sounds and sequences that are stored on floppy diskette to the computer. The second video cassette in this series and Binder 2 show you how to use additional drives. After setting up your system according to the instructions in Binder 1, you are ready to begin.
Now you are ready to load the system. Locate the diskette labeled the Synclavier Realtime Operating System. Insert the disk carefully into the floppy drive with the label facing up. Close the door and press the red load button. This signals a card in your computer to look for a program on the disk called the monitor and load it into the computer's memory. At this point, your keyboard will become active and you're ready to use your system. Press the key on the keyboard and you'll hear a sine wave.
There are many different operating systems for the Synclavier. Each one causes the Synclavier to perform in a different way. Each one is stored on a system diskette, like the one Bill just loaded from, and on the Winchester disk as well. The second video cassette will show you how to load an operating system from the Winchester. Now let's look at the keyboard control panel.
The keyboard control panel is organized to be easy to learn and easy to use. The various buttons on the control panel have now been color-coded, grouping related buttons together. Blue for programming, yellow for recorder functions, and green for storage and recall of timbres and sequences. You will use just one master knob to control all the functions on the panel. Touch a button and it's automatically connected to the knob. Turn to the left, the values will decrease. Turn to the right, the values will increase. The farther you turn the knob, the faster the values change. There are 16 sounds or timbres on your system diskette. They are organized into 2 banks of timbres.
All 8 timbre entries in Timbre Bank 1 were automatically placed in computer memory when we loaded the operating system. The first timbre entry in that bank, the sine wave, was placed on the keyboard. You also received several timbre diskettes. These each have 8 banks of timbres, with 8 timbres in each bank.
Now we'll use the green button area, the timbre sequence storage. To recall a bank of sounds, touch the bank button and a number in the second row. In this case, bank number 1. 8 sounds have now been loaded into the computer's memory. Touch the entry button and a number, you'll get, in this case, number 1, the very first sound in bank 1. Touching number 2 gives us the second sound in bank number 1. Number 3 would give us the third. To change a bank, touch the bank button, hit number 2. This would load the second bank on your system disk into the computer's memory. Touch the entry button again, and number 1, here's the first sound in bank number 2. The second sound in bank number 2. Let's say the 8th sound, number 8 in bank number 2. A resynthesized sound. And remember, you do not need to keep the system disk in the floppy drive to use the Synclavier. But be sure to keep a timbre disk or a disk with some sequences in the drive.
You can also split the Synclavier keyboard so that there are 2 entirely different timbres on the keyboard. Another feature called keyboard envelope lets you assign different sound components to different parts of the keyboard. Both the split keyboard and keyboard envelope are described in the Synclavier user guide in Binder 1. The Synclavier 32-track memory recorder combines the functions of a tape recorder and sound mixer to create a complete sound studio for recording, editing, and producing music. Many of the functions are similar to their counterparts on an analog system. Many are unique to the Synclavier.
To recall a sequence, go to the timbre sequence storage area. Touch the sequence button and a number which would reflect the number of the sequence you have stored on the disk. In this case, sequence number 5. After recalling a sequence, just press the start button. Pressing stop would stop the sequence. The continue button could continue on from this moment where we stopped. Stopping it, rewind, and fast forward are built in. And as a convenience, the computer will mute the tracks going fast forward or rewind. If you'd like to solo a track, touch the track number you'd like to listen to, hit start. Hitting start twice would go to the beginning of the track if there were measures rests up front. If you'd like to erase just one track, for example, here's, we'll take the bass track out, for example. We've got percussion, bass, and Fender Rhodes. Solo track number 2 by turning it on and hit erase twice. You have to hit erase twice to erase a track. At this point, all we have left now is the percussion and the Rhodes. To erase the entire sequence, either turn all of the tracks on or leave them all off, whichever. Remembering hitting erase twice is required to erase the sequence. If you hit the erase button by accident, any other button on the panel will turn it off. Remember, you must hit erase twice to erase a track or the entire sequence. We'll now record a sequence in the digital memory recorder. Select a timbre for track 1, for example, percussion, and hit record. If you have your click track plugged into the audio, you should be able to hear that. That's a comfortable tempo. And just play. Hit stop, and you can play back your track. If you wanted to ignore the beats up front, you can hit start twice. This should go to the first beat on the track. Select a second timbre, let's say a bass instrument. Just hit record. The computer will go ahead and select an available track for playing. Hit stop, selected another timbre. In this case, I believe we've got a Fender Rhodes here. Hit record and play. All this while I've been using justified recording. Justification allows you to go ahead and play very, very accurate rhythms to the click. You can choose a number in the window to subdivide the click between 1 and 16. In this case, I believe I chose a 4, giving me very accurate 16th notes. You can loop the tracks. You can loop the entire sequence. If you are in a justified mode, which can be done with the bounce button right now and very soon the justify button, just play your sequence. Press the end loop button whenever you'd like to loop. As long as you're in a justified mode, the system will wait until the next click and loop on the very next click. To remove the loop, just press the loop button. If you want individual loops on individual tracks, solo a track, let's say the Rhodes track. We'll hit the loop button right about now. Since I've removed the loop from the whole sequence, the Rhodes should loop back at that moment by itself, individually. You can choose to add more timbres. Select another timbre from a different bank, possibly. A small trumpet. Hit record. Computer selects an available track automatically.
There are many different kinds of loops. There are independent loops, which are loops on individual tracks. There are what we call dal segno loops, which are loops that go back to some point in the middle of the sequence, rather than to the beginning. All loops are described in detail in the memory recorder section in Binder 1.
Any of the sequences can be transposed easily by touching the transpose button. This turns the keyboard now into a transposing device. The third C on the keyboard being a middle point for no transposition. If I touch C sharp, it would transpose the sequence up 1/2 step. Play a higher note. Play a lower note. C returns it to the original key. You may transpose individual tracks. For example, the bass track is on track 2. We could place him up 1 octave higher. We could take the Rhodes track on track 3, place it 1 octave lower by playing C in the 2nd octave. Now we have the bass up an octave, the Rhodes down. The SMT in the recorder section, meaning select memory timbre, can be used to change a timbre that's already been recorded on a track without replaying the notes to another sound. For example, in this sequence number 4, or track number 4, I have a trumpet, I believe. I could recall a different sound from any of the banks. Here's a gypsy violin. And even while the recorder's playing, I could change the trumpet track to the fiddle. The SMT button, whenever it's pressed, will blink all of the tracks. This is a prompt to you saying, what track would you like to change the timbre to? For example, this case, track 4. Touch track 4, now more buttons are blinking. This is a prompt that says, what would you like to change track 4 to? In other words, what new sound would you like to change it to? You could select anything from the banks. You could change it to a sound that might be on the other tracks, or you could change it to the keyboard sound. Directly next to the SMT is the SKT button. This refers to select keyboard timbre. Since I've already selected the track, I'm going to select the keyboard timbre by hitting SKT. Now track 4 should have the fiddle on it, and playing the same notes the trumpet did. And now I'll show you how to build up a sequence. I'm going to start with a little bit of percussion and select a comfortable click rate. Let's see what we get here. I'll go with the standard, 120 beats per second, 120 beats per minute. Select the timbre, from your timbre entry buttons. Here in this case, a little conga drum. Hit record and play. I'm going to go for another track. Let's try a kick and a snare. These have the keyboard envelopes already on them. And we'll add this to the conga. In this case, we'll put a loop on track 2. Remember, you can hit start twice and go straight to the beginning of the track. And we'll pick out a spot right about, let's say, beat 25. Remember, you have rewind and fast forward. On our new software, the rewind and fast forward will actually mute the recorder a bit, in case you have a lot of tracks going on at the same time. I'm going to place a loop starting at the downbeat on the kick drum, just on that track. Go for another timbre. How about a bass instrument? And just hit record. Now, if you make an error, you can always punch in. Solo track 3. Hit start twice, you can go straight to the beginning of the track. And punch in right about here. All we need now is a little bit of rhythm. Here comes a Rhodes, I think. We could start from any place, rewind a bit. We can later go back and put a loop on that bass. And go for, let's say, a couple of brass instruments. All we need to do is loop the bass a bit. Now we've got the makings of a fairly good sequence. We could choose to transpose it. Different key. Hitting the speed button might give us a different tempo. And we can hear the sequence now.
These are just the basic features of the memory recorder. There are many others which are described in the memory recorder section of Binder 1. As you have seen, the Synclavier makes it easy to edit your recorded notes. You can use punch in to erase or replace a single note or series of notes. You can change the starting times of tracks, slide them forward in time or back. You can also combine tracks from different sequences. There are many features for synchronization with other instruments or with tape. In the external synchronization mode, a drum machine or other sync pulse or a taped 50 Hz signal can be used to trigger playback and recording. In the SMPTE mode, SMPTE signals can be used to run the Synclavier. The second video cassette within the series shows many ways the computer terminal can be used to display and edit a recorded sequence, as well as transcribe it into standard music notation. At this point, we recommend you take a coffee break. While real skill at sound synthesis is not learned in a day, you will find that the Synclavier partial timbre programming method will help you during the learning process. First of all, you can break a sound into individual components. Second, you can hear each change as soon as you make it. Third, you can store a developing sound in different stages, so that if you find something you like, you can retrieve it again, even after you make additional changes. The basic element in a timbre is the partial timbre. In its default state, a partial timbre is a sine wave tuned to A440. This simple whistle-like sound can be given harmonics to change its waveform. It can be given attack, sustain, and decay envelopes, both for volume and frequency modulation. It can be tuned above or below A440, given all kinds of vibrato or portamento, stereo shape, and so on. Then you can take the partial timbre and combine it with up to 3 more partial timbres. The combined partial timbres are what we call a timbre. Each timbre can have similar or very different partial timbres, depending on the effect you're after.
The partial timbre method is used to layer several different sounds upon one another to create more complex sounds. Here's the sound I've created that's gradually going to shape itself into a snare drum. Here's one element, partial timbre number 3, partial timbre number 4, partial timbre number 2, partial timbre number 1. I could take partial timbre number 2 and change a little bit about its volume shape, make it a little shorter, for a little bit of the fast hit on the snare head. I might decide to do that with this partial timbre number 4. Make that a little tighter. And the other two, I might decide to make a little bit longer. When combining these sounds, then it gradually becomes my snare. The idea is that you can create several different elements of the sound and layer them on top of one another. The Synclavier makes its sounds with a basic element of sound, the sine wave. This is the first sound on your operating system after you load the system. In the harmonic control area on the keyboard panel, you can dial in other sine waves tuned at 2 times, 3 times, 4 times the frequency. These are the numbers on the buttons that reflect the tunings of the extra harmonics that you can dial in. Here's the sine wave that you get when you first load the system. If I press in the harmonic control area button number 3, I could then dial in the 3rd harmonic, 1 octave and a 5th higher. If I hit, let's say, number 4, this would be another sine wave 2 octaves higher than the original. Number 6, the 6th harmonic. Several octaves in the 5th higher. Up to 36 harmonics may be added over the basic sine wave.
The waveform Bill just dialed in is the starting waveform for the partial timbre. It is also possible to dial in additional waveforms for the partial timbre. These additional waveforms are called frames and are the essential elements in the timbres we call resynthesis timbres. A timbre with frames will smoothly change from one waveform to the next during the note. Since most acoustic instruments have changing waveforms, the frame capability allows the creation of very lifelike sounds. For details on programming frames, see the timbre design section in Binder 1.
The volume envelope buttons may be used to tailor the shape of the volume of the sound from its beginning to its end. Here's a Fender Rhodes made up of 3 different elements. As we've seen in the partial timbre method. Partial timbre number 2, very, very short. Its volume envelope must be very fast. The attack time in the window was reading to me in 0 milliseconds, instant attack. And the peak, a level of the attack. How loud does the attack go to? We can change this with the knob, obviously. We could lengthen the shape of this particular sound by touching the initial decay button. This happens after the attack. If I turn the value a little higher, the sound gets longer. It still goes down to no volume at all. This is the sustain button itself. If we increased its value, the sound would then continue to stay at the sustain's volume level. The last button in the envelope, the final decay, would then add time to the volume after we removed our hands from the keys, giving us a long sustain or final decay. One button that I just missed, though, is a delay. You could add a delay onto the volume envelope up to very, very quite long times. If we then returned this particular sound to its original volume shape, we can then combine it with the other two elements of the Fender Rhodes, maybe bring out this particular shape a little louder with a partial volume button. This is located just underneath your partial timbres buttons. This would then create an overall effect over all the settings you have on the volume envelope, so you don't have to go through and worry about the differences with your peak and your sustain volumes. Press the partial volume and turn it up or down, however you want to deal with it. That's an easier way to balance the entire volume envelope against your partial timbres. The harmonic envelope buttons are used in the same way as the volume envelope has been used. In this case, instead of controlling volume, it's controlling a selection of harmonics that you can dial in with a particular frequency modulation ratio. The levels in your volume envelope, peak and sustain, now are levels of harmonics that are created with frequency modulation. You can dial in some form of a level here over just a simple sine wave by touching the peak and sustain buttons and turning the knob to the right. In the same fashion as you designed a volume shape with a volume envelope, you can then change the attack portion of this envelope, controlling harmonics, to gradually sweep up to some level. You could take the sustain button and return it to 0, to where after it got up to some level, it would return to 0, in this case very quickly. The initial decay time, as in the volume envelope, would then return to the sustain level at some amount of time. Punching the initial decay button and turning the knob to the right, then would return this selection of harmonics back to no harmonics at all, returning to our sine wave at some amount of time. You can change the kind of harmonic structure selected with the FM ratio button in the lower left section of this area. Once you turn it on in the default setting of your sine wave that you get when you load your system, you'll see 1.0 as the FM ratio. This is the kind of harmonic selection you would get. If you touch it again, it will go to 2 automatically. This is another set of harmonics. It steps from 2 to 3 to 4 and so on, up to 16, giving you very high harmonics, and then automatically back to 1. But as is in the Synclavier, you can change anything you like with the knob. If you choose to turn on the FM ratio button now with the knob and turn the knob, you can select something in between a whole number. But in this case, your harmonics are not going to be very predictable, let's say. It's just a matter of experimentation as to what you might get. If you are left in the middle, between 1 and 2 or 2 and 3, so on, you can easily get to the next number by simply touching the FM ratio button. All of the values in the harmonic envelope here refer to your selection of harmonics in the same fashion and control as you were dealing with volume in the volume envelope. You can change the tuning of a partial timbre by selecting the partial tuning button. Touching it again would place the partial timbre up 1 octave, again, up another, and so on. It would step through all the various registers. You may also use the knob to make fine adjustments to tune it up or down. Pitch vibrato may be added to a partial timbre by selecting a particular shape with the wave button and dialing in some form of depth. Let's say this would change it according to the readout in your window in semitones. A rate is then selected, which would be given to you in vibrations per second. Different wave shapes could be selected by either touching the wave button a few times. Try it once again. Allowing different basic wave shapes to change the pitch of your partial timbre. Several effects may be added to the vibratos. For example, if we increase the depth on this particular wave shape, We could touch the invert button and flip it upside down. We could select the delayed attack here that's labeled attack under the vibratos section. If we dialed in any amount here with the knob, then the onset of this wave shape would take a particular amount of time to get to its maximum level, whatever you've selected in the window. Please consult binder number 1 for all of the different variations on pitch vibrato. Portamento may be added to a partial timbre, allowing a gradual change in pitch from one note to the next by turning the on-off button under the portamento area. The rate can be changed, allowing different amounts of time to go to the next timbre. And 2 different types of modes. Some interesting effects may be added to very short sounds with the repeat and the arpeggiate button. Turning on the repeat button would then repeat your envelope at a particular rate that you might select 2 buttons to the right. Changing the knob would change the rate. Turn off the repeat button and turn on the arpeggiate button. This, when playing a chord, would repeat the notes of the chord in whichever order you depress them at the keyboard at the current rate. Change the rate, play the same chord. Combining the repeat and the arpeggiate buttons would then play any chord depressed and go back to the beginning and play it again, as long as the keys are held down at the keyboard. Chorus may be added to a partial timbre by pressing the chorus button and dialing in a number with the knob, slightly detuning the partial timbre you have. The number you see reflects a ratio of frequencies between 2 voices now being played at the same time. If you continue to turn the knob, you'll hear the other voice go up. Selecting a ratio of 2 would give you 2 voices 1 octave apart. Selecting a ratio of 3 would give you 2 voices 1 octave and 1/5 apart. Real-time effects may be patched into many different parameters. 8 different real-time effects on the lower end of this particular panel allow you to select velocity, pressure, pedals, modulation wheels, ribbon controllers, keyboard control voltages, and breath controllers. Here I've got a violin with too much vibrato. I'm going to press the pressure button and the depth of the vibrato at the same time. This will then patch me into the amount of the vibrato. Now playing, I'm in control with my hands at the keyboard.